Hello everyone, welcome to today's lecture. In this lecture we are going to learn about big data. So let's start. So big data is a data but with a huge size. Yes, it is also a type of data, but the size of the data is very large, and that is why it is called the big data. Big data is a term used to describe a collection of data that is huge in volume and yet growing exponentially with time. So big data means a data with a huge size, but the data that are growing exponentially with the time, and time increase, the size of the data is not increase linearly, yes, but it increase in the exponential manner. So the collection of data is very huge. So in short, such a data is so large and complex that none of the traditional database management tools are able to store it or process it efficiently. So the size of the data is too large, and that is why the database management tools that we are using for relational database for analysis that are not working on that. So we need to do some different analysis techniques on that. So, and it has a different techniques for, and there are some other techniques built for this type of data. So the example is stocks exchange data. So at each and every second the stock data is generated, and at the end of the day it generates a terabytes of data. So the stocks exchange generates about 1 terabytes of new trade data per day. So the size of this data is too large. Next is the social media. So in the social media, the statistics shows that 500 plus terabytes of new data get generated into the database of social media site of Facebook every day. So this data is mainly generated in terms of photo and video uploads, message exchanges, putting comments, etc. So we can assume that 500 plus terabytes of data is too large in quantity. It is too difficult to store, it is too difficult to manage, too difficult to analyze. So that data is called the big data, and we need to find, and this data is very useful if we analyze that data, because the size of the data is too large. So the information that will extract from that data is a very useful. So we need to analyze that type of data. Now the big data has 4 different characteristics, and it is called the 4 V's of big data, and that are volume, velocity, veracity, and variety. So volume means the scale, the massive volumes of data generated from social media, smartphone, IoT, content, digitalization, etc. at every second. So that huge amounts of data that is generated, so that is the volume. Second is a variety. Variety means the diversity. So the variety of data formats coming from different systems and sources. The formats of data is different from each other and different from each source. So that is the variety of data. Next is the velocity. So the velocity means the speed. So the speed at which the data is getting created and the time it takes to analyze them. So that is a velocity. And the veracity, so the underlying quality of the data. Garbage in equals to garbage out. So veracity is the certainty. So the big data contains that 4 characteristics, that the size of the data is very big. So the volume. Second is it contains a variety of data. So next is a variety. Velocity, speed of generating the data and analyzing them, and veracity. So let's understand each in detail. So first is a volume. So the volume of data refers to the size of the data sets that needs to be analyzed and processed, which are now frequently larger than the terabytes and petabytes. So the sheer volumes of data requires a distinct and different processing technologies than traditional storage and processing capabilities. In other words, this means that the data sets in big data are too large to process with a regular laptop or desktop processor. An example of high volume data set would be all credit card transaction on one day. As we know that multiple people, or we can say that the crores of people use the credit card in a one day, so it generates a very huge amounts of data, and we need to manage the data, we need to analyze the data. So that is the first characteristic, volume. So each and every second the huge volumes of data is generated, and that data is stored at that particular location, and we call this types of data is called the big data. Next is a variety. So variety requires a special mention. Information is available in variety of ways. The data sources, from that we are getting our data. So because it is getting from multiple sources, so the format or the data is a very different from each other. It has a many variety of data. So it could be a spreadsheet, it is a databases, emails, documents, XML format. Yes, it can be anything. So it has a variety of data at one location. Velocity. Velocity refers to the speed with which data is generated. High velocity data is generated with such a place that it requires distinct processing techniques. An example of data that is generated with high velocity would be Twitter messages or the Facebook post, because it is generated lakhs of people posting a image, you're posting a comment at the same time. So in between 2 seconds terabytes of data is generated. Yes, so the speeds of data, so that is called the velocity. And the veracity. Veracity refers to the quality of data that is being analyzed. High veracity data has many records that are valuable to analyze and that contribute in a meaningful way to overall results. So after getting the data, now the quality is also a big term, because if your data is not in a good quality, then we are not getting a proper results. So if our data has a good quality, so at the end we are getting a good result or the meaningful results. So that is measured, or that is called the veracity. An example of high veracity data set would be data from medical experiments or trials. Suppose we are giving our blood sample and some processing is done on that. So the data is too sensible, and if we are changing in it, so it may affect the result. So at that time we need to maintain the veracity or the quality of data. Data that is high volume, high velocity and high variety must be processed with advanced tools to reveal a meaningful information, and that advanced tools are different big data analytics algorithms. Because of these characteristics of data, the knowledge domain that deals with storage, processing and analysis of these data sets has been labeled big data. So for that, the neural network and different versions of neural network that or some deep learning neural network are very useful for such kinds of data, because that types of neural network requires a large quantity of data. So we can apply these types of data on that types of neural network to get the result in a shorter time. So but one main thing we need to understand is, because the data size is too large, so we are not handle this data on our normal laptop or desktop. We need a high performance laptop or PC to handle such kinds of data. So that is about the introduction of big data. So big data has a main 4 quality, which is a volume, variety, veracity and velocity. So that's it about today's lecture. Thank you so much for listening.